Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sam tato jayam udhiraya. Nasta pareshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. Reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 6, Canto 3, Chapter 6, Creation of the Universal Form, verse number 6. Hiranmaya sa purusha sahasra parivatsaran anda kosha uvasapsu sarva satvot pabrimita hiranmaya sapurusha sahasra pravisatsaran andakosha ivasapsu sarva sattvo prabhimita hiranmaya sapurusha sahasra parivatsaran andakosha ivasapsu sarva sattva prabhimita hiranmaya sapurusha sahasra parivatsaran andakosha ivasapsu sarva sattva prabhimita. Hare Krishna. Hiranmaya, the Garbhodakshai Vishnu, who also assumes the Virat Rupa. Sa, he, Purusha, incarnation of Godhead. Sahasra, 1,000. Parivatsaran, celestial years. Andakoshe, within the global universe. Uvasa, resided. Apsu, on the water. Sarvasattva, all living entities lying with him. Ubramita, so spread. Translation. The gigantic Virat Purusha known as Hiranmaya lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. Please repeat. The gigantic Virat Purusha known as Hiranmaya lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. After the Lord entered each and every universe as the Garbhodakshai Vishnu, half of the universe was filled with water. The cosmic manifestation of the planetary systems, outer space, etc., which are visible to us, is only one half of the complete universe. Before the manifestation takes place, and after the entrance of Vishnu within the universe, there is a period of 1,000 celestial years. All the living entities injected within the womb of the Mahatattva are divided in all universes with the incarnation of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and all of them lie down with the Lord until Brahma is born. Brahma is the first living being within the universe, and from him all other demigods and living creatures are born. Manu is the original father of mankind, and therefore in Sanskrit, mankind is called Manusya. Humanity is in different bodily qualities, is distributed throughout the various planetary systems. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmidamnena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishnam Stapidamnena Bhutale Svayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Svapanantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadudam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpadrubhyascha Kripasindubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Dibyad Brindaranya Kalpajamada, Śrīmad Ratnagara Singha Sanasto, Śrīmad Radha Shalagovinda Devo, Stalabi, Savior Manu, Smarami, Hiranmaya Sapurusha, Sahasra Parivatsaran, Andakosha Vasapsu, Sarva Sat Vo Paprimhita. The gigantic Virat Purusha, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. So, creation of the universal form, a detailed account, and there are many such, or several such, throughout the Bhagavatam, here in the teachings of Maitreya to Uddhava, their conversation and teachings. So what we're hearing today is Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, also known as Hiranmaya, enters each and every universe. Half the universe was filled with water. The cosmic manifestation of the planetary system, outer space, etc., which are visible to us, is only one half of the complete universe. So, first point is that we cannot understand everything that's happening and going on by our own limited perception and vision. The senses that we've been given are only made to interact, contact with the objects of gratification based on the type of body that we've been given. Therefore, one of the four defects is imperfect senses. You can look at the very nice videos of Srila Prabhupada speaking in Australia, I believe 1975, and question and answer for one of the classes there was something like, how can I believe that Lord Brahma has 4 heads and he rides on a swan? And Prabhupada said, what is your vision? What is your brain? It's very teeny. What is your experience? It's nothing. Before the manifestation takes place and after the entrance of Vishnu within the universe, there is a period of 1,000 celestial years. Prabhupada in one place says that one should keep in mind all of these creations and annihilations up to the Mahakalpa, when everything is completely destroyed, what to speak of the partial devastations that in relationship to the end of the complete life of Lord Brahma, also a fantastic amount of time, so that one can be detached from this material world. Just as we're all on a regular basis, if not moment to moment, if we're intelligent, we're contemplating the end of this so-called who I am right now, this body. We have to die. And what is next? What's going to happen to us? We all know what's going on. We have my hands and legs. Hopefully they work. We live where we are, or whatever choices we have to do this and that, think this and that, contemplate this and that. But when the body and the mind and the place where we live and the things that we have to do these things, our so-called possessions, are all taken away, then what's left? So we as aspiring devotees, Prabhupada one time, devotee said, we're Vaishnavas, and Prabhupada corrected him and said, we are not Vaishnava. Vaishnava is a very, very high thing. So we're trying to come to the pure devotional platform, and we see we have a lot of work to do. Actually, at the end of the purport in describing Manusha, there's the song Manusha Janmapaya Radha Krishna Na Bhajiya. Although I've achieved this rare human form of life, I have neglected to worship Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Therefore my human life has been spoiled. Narottam Das Thakur, similarly in his, that's from Partana, this Manusha Janma, Hari Hari Bifale Janma Gunaino, also the statement, which is very important, is in that song. Golo Kara, Premadana, Harinam Sankirtan, the treasure of divine love, which Lord Chaitanya affirms is the actual happiness, Amrita, nectar for which we're always anxious, has descended into this world in the form of the Sankirtan movement, the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So a period of 1,000 celestial years. And what are we doing during those 1,000 celestial years? All living entities injected with the womb of the Mahatattva are divided in all universes with the incarnation of Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and all of them lie down with the Lord until Brahma is born. That's a long, long time. So we have this life, and however long it lasts, we're doing and we're moving and we're thinking and whatever we're planning, and we're thinking this is me. But then after death, for those who don't go back home, back to Godhead, which Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita affirms and confirms that They never come back. They come to me. In so many places, Krishna encourages. Ultimately, in the 18th chapter, do not worry, Masucha, do not fear. Everything is taken care of. So this is a period of time for the conditioned soul to contemplate, or the impression of such a long and heavy imprisonment or purgatory is part of the process to chasten or correct the false notion of he, the living soul, who is ultimately the eternal servant of Krishna, that think that he's separate. In the 11th canto, Uddhava Gita, when one gives up the conception that one is Krishna's servant, one becomes Krishna's competitor. That's what everyone's trying to be, a little Radha and Krishna running all around, imitating Krishna and his eternal consort, imitating the goddess of fortune. But we can see how not only disgusting and repugnant such imitation is, but what even the so-called, as it's going along, even in youthful times, they think it's very nice, how it's actually horrible, but what it actually leads to. Repeated birth, death, disease, and old age. So here in this material world, there's a chief living entity who is the source of all the other living entities. That is not there in the spiritual world. Everyone stands on their own merit based on their fully developed and aroused and ever-expanding bhakti. You don't need to be born of a Lord Brahma. Brahma is the first living being within the universe, and we see how Lord Brahma is fallible. He gives benedictions to Hiranyakashipu, who terrorizes the universe and creates a gigantic disturbance. He doesn't understand that Bal Gopal is the supreme personality of Godhead, and he tries to steal his calves and cowherd boys. Some problems, big problems. All other demigods and living creatures are born. Even in the third canto, in this canto, Lord Brahma becomes infatuated, as all living entities are susceptible, and unless they're devotees, likely or predicted to be attracted by sex desire, in that case with his own daughter. This is the chief living entity in this universe. Any questions or comments?
Well, apparently we see that Lord Brahma as a demigod, he has some faults, but at the same time we know Lord Brahma is the beginning of our samprada.
Correct.
From this perspective we accept him as infallible.
Yes, there's Brahma Samhita, for example. The point that I'm making here is that any position in this material universe is not us, and therefore it's all part of the program to realize it's undesirable. You ever get asked, do you believe in reincarnation? I have an answer, I say. Do you believe in getting left back in school? Getting left back, and it's not a question of believing, it's a reality, but it's undesirable. And of course, Lord Brahma, he becomes, in Lord Chaitanya's Leela, Brahma Haridas Thakur, and the extreme humility demonstrated by Lord Brahma as Brahma Haridas was based upon how sorry he was for attempting to steal the calves and cowherd boys. The amazing prayers in contrition that Lord Brahma offered in the 14th chapter, which has so many instructive and approved verses by Lord Chaitanya. What is that? One who goes on tolerating all the results of his previous sinful activities, all the while calling out and maintaining deep devotion. He goes back home, back to Godhead, because it's become its rightful claim. What is the Sanskrit? Jnanai? Tatenukampam, that's right. But at the end of all those prayers, Krishna is just standing there, and by Lord Brahma's perception, couldn't understand whether he was pleased or displeased. The acharyas give commentary that Krishna, he was completely in his self, that I'm a 7-year-old boy, and who is this Lord Brahma saying all of these big, big words? I'm just concerned about my calves and cowherd boys. But Lord Brahma, I don't know whether my Lord is pleased or accepting my prayer or displeased. Even in the case of Indra, after his devastating Govardhan Hill, the residents devastating Vrindavan, he was actually trying to commit genocide, or as we say today, crimes against humanity. Not just taking the calves and cowherd boys, by his calculation, which was a moment, just for a moment. Of course, his moment turned into 1 year on this planet. Krishna goes from being 6 and all the calves and all the cowherd boys from 6 to 7 years old. But he purposely, Indra, tried to destroy, murder, basically, Even the Samvartaka clouds, which are all only reserved to come for the devastation, when they heard Indra's order, they were like, whoa, we don't want to do this. Just like police, if they're told to do something which is illegal or unconstitutional, they best not do it. But anyway, the Samvartaka clouds went ahead and did it. Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, saved the situation. But then he comes and offers prayers. Lord Brahma came and offered his prayers by himself. Whether you, what is it? Whether you can, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, you can save me, you can kill me, you can do as you like. Indra came with a lawyer. What is it? Mother Bhumi in the shape of a cow. Mother Sarabi. And Mother Sarabi wasn't such a great lawyer saying, oh, you can forgive this guy. She was kind of like, this guy is like, but if you like, you can forgive him, But then Krishna addressed Indra, said, all right, you go back to your celestial kingdom, and he wasn't angry. He just settled the whole thing up. Everything is finished. We don't see Indra reappearing in Chaitanya Leela in an extraordinary personage as Haridas Thakur. Actually, Krishna and the 7-year-old boy, and not letting Brahma know whether he's forgiven or not and leaving him hanging, paved the way for him to appear as Brahma Haridas Thakur and be most important, one of the most important in Lord Chaitanya's Leela by being the Namacharya, showing the importance of chanting the holy name. All of you say, all glories to Haridas Thakur, who revealed the importance of chanting the holy name. Still, we say, oh, he chanted 300,000 names a day, but there was one devotee who wasn't chanting 300,000 names a day, but was very greatly favored as the chief of the whole sampradaya of Lord Chaitanya as his disciple. That was Srila Rupa Goswami. And who is Rupa Goswami? Sri Rupa Manjari. Sri Rupa Manjari's position is certainly more advanced in love of Godhead and in direct service to the divine couple than Lord Brahma. But everything is, especially in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, adjusted in such a way that the inconceivable glory of the devotees is brought out. And these things are very extraordinary, inconceivable, and wonderful. Any other questions on this verse? Because I'll spend the rest of the time speaking about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in preparation for tomorrow. Yes? No? Good. Maharaj, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. So, we'll look at the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, which describes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance and in relationship to our Srila Prabhupada's relationship with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his requesting a personal instruction just in the last little time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's presence, and his receiving that instruction, and how that instruction ultimately brought about this Krishna consciousness movement. We were all safely sheltered and placed this very day. December 1936. Can you hear me? Because otherwise this can be made louder, because I don't want to speak any louder. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was in poor health at Jagannath Puri. Abhay was in Bombay and he wanted to write his Guru Maharaj a letter. He is a little kind upon me, Abhay thought. He will understand my request. And he began to write, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. You have got many disciples, and I am one of them, but they are doing direct service to you. Some of them are brahmacharis, some of them are sannyasis, but I am a householder, I cannot. Sometimes they give monetary help, while I cannot give you direct service. Is there any particular service I can do? So this was something that was weighing heavily on our Srila Prabhupada's mind, and also it was kind of reinforced by his godbrothers, kind of like Prabhupada was favored by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He'd be invited in to speak with him personally, privately. His godbrothers would be, who is this new man? And Prabhupada was only officially initiated in 1932. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta established the mission in 1918. So he had many disciples that had already been with him for 8, 10, 12, 14 years, right? Is that like, oh, I'm 14 years older than you, Prabhu, The back of the line is over here, Even derogatory term, and also brahmachari, sannyasi. So those are, so that we saw that manifestation in the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party, we're better than grihastas and women and stuff, and we have like this kind of elitist attitude. And ultimately the controversy reached a boiling point and went to Srila Prabhupada, and one of the results was that one of the leaders of that party was taken from the service and sent to China to diffuse the situation. Anyway, so Prabhupada was called Rotten Grihasta. So we see how then later when the Gaudiya Math broke apart, that Prabhupada's not being in the inner circle and not being part of all the inner dealings and all the management and all of the interpersonal relationships on a very deep level. Prabhupada was always like a kind of on the outer periphery. This suddenly became to his favor. And Prabhupada wasn't embroiled in the court cases, or even worse, murder plots and fist fights. And Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta created guided Srila Prabhupada, or arranged his life in such a way, and even predicted it, that he will do everything himself in due course of time. Prabhupada helped to start the Bombay Gaudiya Math and during his householder times, and the God brothers who were there at the time were recommending to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, or urging or expressing their disappointment. Why is Abai not living with us? He should be the temple president. And he said, it is better, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, that he remains outside your company. In due course of time, he will do everything himself. You do not have to recommend him. Another prophetic revelation of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta came in 1935, when who would go to London and assist in the preaching there, which he had begun, I believe, 1932 or 3 also, or 1934. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada was recommended. He had because of his command of the English language, he had already proved himself as an approved writer on Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta. And Srila Prabhupada wasn't present. And one devotee who was asked, he had a PhD, which was a rare thing for an Indian to have in those days. And he didn't want to leave. I can't go away from your lotus feet. And just out of nowhere, Srila Bhakti said, well, Abhay Charan Aravinda, he can go. Of course, not at that time. And then, of course, there's the wonderful Navadvip Mandal Prikram speech that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave, and was speaking about the need to preach in the West. And our Srila Prabhupada was present as a grihasta behind all the sannyasis and brahmacharis, towards the back. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaking about the need to preach and save the fallen souls and expand the movement in the West, stopped speaking, made direct eye contact with our Srila Prabhupada. This is reported. You can read it. The account is there. It's in Mul Prakriti's, what is her book called? She interviewed many personalities who knew Srila Prabhupada in India before he started the Krishna consciousness movement. So there was one disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It's also in the second volume of this Bhaktisiddhanta by Bhav. Right. Our Srila Prabhupada, A Friend to All, book compiled by Mool Prakriti Devi Dasi, one of Prabhupada's disciples who was very excellent as a female book distributor. In her memoir, which you can hear on Siddhanta's memory series, she said that Prabhupada said to her personally, in this Kali Yuga for preaching, it's very good to have a female body, because in this Kali Yuga people are suspicious, and if a man comes up, they're very, who are you, what is this? But if a woman comes up and starts talking, then it's very easy, they will listen to you. And she was an incredible book distributor. She passed away in 2004, some years ago. Went back home to Srila Prabhupada. So, I think his name was Nayan Bhatta. No, not Nayan Bhatta. That's a devotee who hundreds of years ago helped rediscover Vrindavan. Anyway, so this devotee is saying, then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, but I have a prediction. No matter how many years in the future it will be, one of my disciples will cross the ocean and bring back the entire world. And that was Srila Prabhupada. Actually, just previous to this here in the Leelamrita is the Radhakund exchange, which wasn't on the banks of Radhakund, but it was in the house just off Radhakund, down a lane on the Shamakund side, where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was staying. There's an in-sleeve painting of that. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is in his bed with the mosquito net, and Srila Prabhupada with one of his sons is there. There had been quarreling amongst the leading disciples in Calcutta, and this distressed Srila Bhaktisiddhanta very much. Even now in Vrindavan. Can you make this louder? Because this is like, I want it over here so I don't have to. And it distressed him very much. Even now in Vrindavan, it weighed heavily on his mind. Some of his disciples have been fighting over who would use various rooms and facilities of the Gaudiya Math headquarters in Calcutta. These devotees were good. We're all members of the same Math, and the building was for propagating Krishna consciousness. Brahmins and Vaishnavas are supposed to be free from envy of any creature, what to speak of envy of each other. If they fight now, what would they do after their spiritual master left the planet? Abai had no part in these matters and did not even know the details or who was involved, but he listened to his spiritual master. He also became distressed. Deeply concerned, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Abai, there will be fire. One day there will be fire in the Calcutta Gaudiya Math, and that fire of party interest will spread and destroy. Abai heard but did not know what to make of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had fought so long and boldly to establish that anyone of any birth could be elevated to become a Brahmin, a sannyasi, or a Vaishnava, but if his followers became contaminated by little wealth and the desire for prestige, thereby showing themselves to be still low-class men despite their training and purification, then his mission would be disrupted. If in the name of religion they became attached to ease, position, and prestige, it could only mean that they had failed to grasp the teachings of their spiritual master, our Srila Prabhupada. He was lamenting that these men were simply after the stones and bricks of the building. He condemned. He was very, very sorry. When we were living in a rented house, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees a month, we were living very nicely. We were happier then. But since we've been given this big marble palace, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. We'd be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abai felt his spiritual master speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or warning him to avert a disaster. But what could he do? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said directly to Abai, Amar Icha Chila Kichu Bai Karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radhakund and beholding his spiritual master, Abai felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. There's the memoir of Lekha Shivranti, who was Elizabeth Lisa Ruther, the younger daughter of Walter Ruther, who was the father of the United Auto Workers Labor Union, who directly went up against the tyranny of the Ford Corporation in the 1930s. Henry Ford had hired some 2,000 thugs to beat the United Auto Workers in their attempt to create a union. There's famous news and photograph of that. Ultimately, he was triumphant. So then later, he passed away in a mysterious airplane crash in 1970, but later, Elizabeth Ruther, Lekha Shivranti, joined and became a devotee, and she was being married in August of 1970. Prior to that, she met Srila Prabhupada directly. She had an older sister, and the family had a life insurance policy, and at that time she had $50,000, and she was given a darshan of Srila Prabhupada, and she was upset. Both her mother and father perished in that plane crash, and Prabhupada preached her, and how the soul is eternal, your mother and father are not dead, they're existing somewhere. And she gave Prabhupada directly $50,000, and Prabhupada immediately took that money and used it to print books, perhaps one of the Bhagavatams that was coming out at that time. So, if you ever get money, print books. 2 weeks later, Abai received a reply. So this time of the year, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta passed away on December 31st. This is December 21st. So the letter, I believe the date was December 13th. The reply: I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members. That's us. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. Has it done good to us? Yes. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. Abai at once recognized this to be the same instruction he had received at their first meeting in 1922. If you look at Srila Prabhupada's lectures and festivals in New Gorakhpur, February 1971, that's the Advent Day, Srila Prabhupada gives a very, very detailed chronological account of all the events in his life, in particular in meeting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and he describes at length how he was forcibly dragged by his friend Narendranath Malik. There's a very nice saintly person in Calcutta, we want your opinion. And Srila Prabhupada is describing how he had not a very good opinion about all these sadhus in Calcutta. His father would entertain as many as 4 a day in his house, and Prabhupada said many of them were not on the proper standard. And then when he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, before even being able to get a comprehensible opinion, even getting up from offering obeisances, Srila Bhakti said, you're an intelligent young man, why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya's movement all over the world? Prabhupada was just flabbergasted. And then of course the argument offered, we're a dependent nation, who is going to hear our message? First we must have Swaraj, independence, and all of that was immediately and completely dismantled. That argument was completely defeated. And Srila Prabhupada said, I'd never been defeated before in my life. But it felt good to be defeated. This defeat was not a defeat, it was actually a great gain. I've met such a nice saintly person. Prabhupada said that I felt I was initiated right on that moment, and for the next 11 years until in 1933, even though I was not officially initiated for 11 years more, I felt that I've met my spiritual master. I once recognized this to be the same instruction he had received at their first meeting in 1922. He took it as a confirmation. There was no doubt as to the purpose of his life. Now, what his spiritual master said in Calcutta in 1922 had not been a chance remark. Nor had that been a chance meeting. Lochanananda Prabhu, who was residing here in New York, who had served Srila Prabhupada in Europe, had brought Prabhupada's last visit to France in August 1976. There was a Sankirtan newsletter, which was quite lengthy, and Lochanananda Prabhu had written, not just the scores, but, nice presentation, the purpose of Sankirtan, or the meaning of Sankirtan. And Srila Prabhupada, he said, read it in its entirety. And it was kind of lengthy, and Srila Prabhupada listened to it. And when he heard the literary presentation about the meaning of the importance of Sankirtan by Lochanananda, said, this is very nice. So Lochanananda, giving his realization, is saying that what I took away from that all these years is that that I should write very, very carefully, because Prabhupada will directly want to hear it. And you can see Lochanananda, he writes very, very nicely. And he said that the words of Srila Prabhupada, Lochanananda, should never be taken to be, like it says, an offhand remark, but they're very purposeful, direct, and deeply meaningful. Just like a sharpshooter, I'm going to shoot, that bullet is going to go do exactly what it's meant to do, to pierce the target. So the words of the saintly person are just like that. Not been a chance remark. The instruction was the same. Turn yourself into a very good English preacher. This will do good to yourself as well as your audience. Srila Bhaktisanta passed away from this mortal world on January 1st, 5:30 in the morning, 1937. He had been spending his last days reading Chaitanya Charitamrita and chanting on his beads when a doctor had visited him, wanting to give him an injection. He had protested, "Why are you disturbing me in this way? Simply chant Hare Krishna. That's all." Amongst his last words to his disciples were, "I advise all to preach the teachings of Rupa Raghunath, disciples of Lord Chaitanya, with all energy and resources. Our ultimate goal shall become the dust at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Raghunath Goswamis. You should all work conjointly under the guidance of your spiritual master with a view to serve the absolute knowledge, the personality of Godhead. You should live somehow or other without any quarrel in this mortal world, only for the service of Godhead. Do not, please, give up the service of Godhead in spite of all dangers, all criticisms, and all discomforts. Do not be disappointed, for most people in the world do not serve the personality of Godhead. Do not give up your own service, which is your everything and all. Neither reject the process of chanting and hearing of the transcendental holy name of Godhead. You should always chant the transcendental name of Godhead with patience and forbearance like a tree, and humbleness like a straw. There are many amongst you who are well qualified and able workers. We have no other desire whatsoever." Very soon word reached Abai in Bombay. His immediate response was to cry with grief. No more joy of an anticipated meeting, no more trips to Calcutta or Vrindavan on the plea of business, just to see the tall, commanding form of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the evangelic angel. The sense of never meeting again was difficult to bear. Philosophically, Abai knew there was no reason to lament. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had come into the world to execute the mission of Lord Chaitanya, and now it was required that he leave this place and go to another, where he would again engage in the same activity. Yet even armed with this philosophy, Abai felt all alone. His two great well-wishers were gone, his father and now his spiritual master. But he felt grateful that he had received a special mercy, a final instruction, just 2 weeks before his spiritual master's departure. Abai read his letter again and again. There would not be another. The intimate talks and meetings were now gone, but by this letter especially, Abai would live in the instructions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. For a very sincere and advanced disciple, the spiritual master will continue to give association and communicate. Srila Prabhupada said, I never felt alone, even in New York for 1 year before devotees came. I always felt the presence of him, my spiritual master. And in that Gorakhpur, February 1971, Prabhupada, he's on to the point where he's writing the Bhagavatam, first canto, part 1. Oh, he's getting money. People like standing 18 books, standing order, U.S. Embassy in Delhi. And he came out with volume 2, volume 3. And Prabhupada says, and they even put it in the Hare Krishna, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all movie. Said, when I've completed the 3rd volume, then Guru Maharaj gave indication, now you can start for America. With the first 3 volumes of the Bhagavatam, Canto 1. He would live in the instructions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. The letter had come just in time. Now he knew for certain, no matter what anyone else said, how to please his spiritual master and stay linked with Krishna. Following his order, he would conquer the feeling of loss at the disappearance of his most affectionate well-wisher. It's very poignant how after this moving, no matter what happened, he'd be connected. What's the next chapter? The war. World War II. Hare Krishna. So the position of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is very, very important for so many reasons, but especially as affirmed by Srila Prabhupada, that this Krishna consciousness movement has been is created and formed and is going on to execute the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada writes that on Rama Akadasi Day, November 10th, 1974, in his quarters in Juhu, Bombay, on the occasion of the completion of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Prabhupada, especially his book distributors, said that my spiritual master will pour his blessings upon you hundreds and thousands of times more than me. He wanted this. And everyone in the Krishna consciousness movement, we are pleasing Srila Prabhupada, we're serving Srila Prabhupada, we're serving his spiritual master, and we see in some temples of the Krishna consciousness movement, Vrindavan, Juhu Beach, Bombay, I think Radha Desh, there are deities on the altar side by side on either side of Gorni Tai of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, helping us to understand Guru Gauranga, their interrelationship, inseparable, intertwined relationship, and such a personality as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and his chief disciple, Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.